I wanted to speak today about the increased numbers of domestic abuse that are being reported worldwide, and which has been directly linked to the coronavirus pandemic. I also want to provide some practical considerations for women who might be experiencing domestic abuse at this moment in time, and what remedies may be available to her from the English Family Court. Throughout, I will be referring to women being the victims, and that is simply because of the statistics that we have. Women tend to be the victims of domestic abuse in far greater numbers than men. On the 28th of March this year, there was an article in the Guardian newspaper, and it made reference to an article in the Time, which stated that in a number of countries, and specifically made reference to the UK, China and the US, there had been an increase in domestic abuse cases being reported because of Covid-19. There was also reference to perpetrators throwing their victims out onto the streets in the hope that they would become sick and withholding essential financial assistance and medication. There was also reference to the National Domestic Abuse Helpline, whereby on a particular Saturday in March 2020, compared to the Saturday earlier, there had been a 65% increase in the number of telephone calls to their helpline. Very worryingly indeed, there was reference to the Counting Dead project, and they disclosed analysis of their initial data, which suggested that there had been an increase in the number of killings of women by men. And in a 2-week period, which I assume took place in March 2020, 8 women had been killed by men, with a suspected 4 other deaths. The World Health Organization has already reported that 1 in 3 women during their lifetime will be a victim of domestic abuse. They will be a victim of sexual or physical abuse within an intimate partner relationship, although there could be sexual abuse by another perpetrator, but it's mainly within an intimate partner relationship. So if you are a victim of domestic abuse and you're suffering it at the moment, these figures should show that you are not alone, and it's absolutely right that you find out what help is available to you so that you can bring the abuse that you're subjected to an end. As a reminder, domestic abuse can take many forms. It can include threatening or actual physical or sexual violence. It can include emotional, psychological harm, including financial abuse. It can include harassment. With the greater use of electrical gadgets and social media, harassment online comes within the definition of domestic abuse, as does revenge porn. Female genital mutilation, forced marriages are also examples. What is the impact upon women? The impact on women can be extremely serious indeed. It can have an impact on them emotionally, psychologically and mentally long term. It can involve the transmission of sexually transmitted diseases and have an impact on a woman's reproductive health system. It can result in unplanned pregnancies. And most tragic of all, it can result in the woman's death. The English Family Court has a very wide interpretation of domestic abuse, and it will want to help, would want to provide protective orders, then refuse to do anything at all, providing the relevant information and evidences before it. Now, why has there been this increase in the number of cases being reported worldwide? It would appear it's because of the way the coronavirus spreads, and as a result of that, the resulting restrictions that have been imposed in many countries, sometimes with criminal sanctions if not complied with, and this can include the need for social distancing measures. If you're someone who may have become a victim of the virus, that you need to self-isolate, or simply the need for many of us worldwide, which is to simply stay at home. And all of these have had an impact on the ability of someone being able to make contact with someone outside the immediate household, which they would ordinarily be able to do with quite some ease, especially by telephone. That privacy that someone may have had has now been lost. In addition to that, the need for people to stay at home to stop the spread of the virus, whereby people have to work from home. There may be being working from home and still have an income. Some people may now be without an income. this has had a direct impact upon the tension and stress levels within a household. And because children are not able to go to school because of school closures, children may now be witnessing this change in the atmosphere at homes, and they are becoming witnesses to the greater aggression and maybe abusive language and physical assaults that might be taking place within the household, which can all have an impact on children. Some adults may be finding this change in their environment at home very difficult to manage and are resorting to drugs or alcohol to try and provide some form of relief to them, which in itself will have negative consequences. So all of these could play a role as to why there's been an increase in the reports of domestic abuse cases worldwide. And why could women be a particular victim? Now, if the income that comes into a household has decreased, especially in those cases where the income is very stretched as it is, and if that has decreased because a woman has either lost her work completely or she's on reduced hours and therefore her income has decreased, this may present her to be a particular target because the man, her partner, takes out his stress and frustrations upon her. It could also be because the perpetrator is taking advantage of the restrictions and therefore is preventing the woman from being able to make contact with important friends or particular family members who she would normally go to confide or try and get some help from. So she's not able to make that contact. So, where she may have felt isolated before, she's felt completely isolated and is now in a very restrictive household and has no privacy. Advantage could also be taken if the information about the effects of coronavirus or what safeguarding measures should be taken is being disseminated in English, and English is not the victim's first language. The victim could be provided with misleading information by the perpetrator, and this is another form of control upon the victim by the perpetrator. Women who are working from home are also finding themselves in a very difficult position because not only do they have to work from home, they may now become the primary carer of young children because of school closures. They still need to manage a household. They might need to care for someone in the appropriate way who may have been affected by the disease, and also dealing with a partner who might have lost his job, who is no longer contributing to the household financially, who's letting out his frustrations and anger upon her. The essential support networks which may have been available to women on a daily basis may now be lost. This could have involved meeting other mums at the school gates or popping in to see a family friend or a family member during the day, or Jenny being able to speak on the phone freely as she would have been able to before. If a woman was at risk before Covid-19, she may be at a heightened level of risk now because of these extra restrictions that have been imposed upon all of us, which is making her feel further isolated and restricted in terms of who she can make contact with. Children may be more vulnerable now because they no longer have access to their support networks. They no longer are able to go to school, which would have been a place of safety for them. And if those adults who are now caring for them full time are failing in their duties to provide the appropriate level of care, this places children at a greater risk of harm. So what help is out there? Now, if you are in an emergency situation, you are in a position where you are at immediate risk of harm, of serious harm, you must dial 999 immediately and obtain assistance from the police. Solicitors, we can obtain protective orders for you from the court. These will protect you and any relevant dependent child. These applications can be made to a family court, and the family courts are trying to avoid physical hearings wherever possible, and they're trying to deal with cases remotely because of COVID-19. There is no court fee payable when you apply for a court order, and these court orders will specifically address the abuse that you've been subjected to. Court orders generally will forbid threatening or abusive behaviour or violent behaviour towards you. It will forbid being pestered, harassed or intimidated by someone. It will control how the perpetrator may communicate with you or forbid communication altogether. It can also forbid the perpetrator from attending to the place where you are living. It is also possible, if appropriate, to get an order whereby someone is ordered to vacate the family home. If that is not appropriate for whatever reason, which includes the court not wanting to make someone homeless, the court can regulate how the family home is occupied. So the communal parts of the family home can be regulated, for example, the kitchen, the bathroom, the living room. You can also get orders whereby the perpetrator is forbidden from entering the bedroom of where the victim sleeps. Emergency orders can be obtained without the other party knowing that an application has been made, or in fact an order has been made in their absence. This could be really important if there's an urgency to your matter and you're also very scared that if the other party was aware that you were about to apply for an order, this could place you at greater risk of harm. If you were to apply for an emergency order and one is granted, the other party is not bound by the terms of the order until they have been served with it, i.e. that they are aware that an order has been made and the terms of the order. Usually this is done by the other party being personally served, but with the court's permission, you can get service by email. And I would have thought that because of the pandemic, it will be far more easier to get permission from the court to serve the other party by email. Legal aid is also available to those who financially qualify. Another option, and this is really in the cases where either you might not be ready to issue court proceedings, or you may have been advised that the abuse that you have been subjected to does not meet the court criteria to obtain an injunction order, is for there to be a warning letter written to the other party by your solicitor. And they can warn the other party that if they repeat their behaviour or if it continues or becomes worse, an application can be made to the courts for an injunction order and they will be asked to pay the cost of that application. If you need to apply to the court for an injunction order after a warning letter has been sent, you should exhibit that warning letter to your application to illustrate to the court that you've done all that you can, which might also include having reported the matter to the police, but you now need the court to intervene and grant you the protective orders that you need. If you are not sure which solicitor to approach, or you do not know any family solicitor who is local to you, you can visit the Resolution First for Family Law website. Resolution have a number of solicitors who are usually specialists in family law, and there will be a Find a Member tab, and you can click on the tab and it will give you solicitors who are local to you. It will also indicate whether the solicitor undertakes legally aided work or not. Alternatively, you can visit the Law Society website and they have a Find a Solicitor tab, and again you can click on that, feed in the relevant information, again find family solicitors who are local to you. Both Resolution and the Law Society will have accredited specialist family solicitors who specialise in domestic abuse cases. What other help is available, and one of the most important, quite a vital layer of support, are support groups, women organisations, and there are a number of really good organisations out there, and you can do an online search and find an appropriate organisation. Many of these organisations are charities and they rely upon external fundings and grants, and given the times that we are in, it's really important the government, both at national and local level, ensure that these organisations continue to receive the funding that they need so that women and children who are at risk are able to access their services and, if need be, are able to flee from their home and take up safe temporary accommodation in a women's refuge. Now, these support groups, some of these women's support groups provide services to women of a particular background or culture. They will also have support workers who speak specific languages to ensure that a victim fully understands her position and what options are available to her. There are, like I said, a number of organisations. being a practitioner in London, there are the few that I always have at hand. One is Refuge. Refuge is a national organisation and they provide assistance to women of all backgrounds. There is the National Domestic Abuse telephone number, which is 0808 2000 247, and that telephone number is available 24/7. Being a practitioner in London, there's also Southall Black Sisters, and their website shows that they primarily help women of Black and minority women backgrounds, but they will help all women who find themselves in an emergency. There is Kiran Support Services. They focus on providing safe temporary accommodation assistance to women who originate from the Indian subcontinent or for women who have similar related cultures and backgrounds. There's also ICRO, and ICRO is a refuge for Middle Eastern, North African and women from Afghanistan. These are just some examples of support groups who are more than willing to provide the help that is desperately needed. But as I have said, there are a number of organisations and you can do an online search. Another form of assistance, which I think is really, really important especially if you're active in your community and you are aware that there was a woman before COVID-19 who was suffering from domestic abuse or who was feeling isolated. If it is safe to do so, make contact with her, keep in contact with her as much as you can to ensure that she is okay and also that she is not being subjected to further or in a far more difficult position than she was before the coronavirus pandemic. In relation to those who are suffering from domestic abuse, it's really important for you to think about if your situation gets to such a stage where you cannot take any more and it's time for you to leave, how would you leave? What is your exit plan? Where would you go for urgent help? Have you spoken to a trustworthy friend or family member? Do you need to go to a safe house? Do you need to go to a women's refuge? Have you thought about taking legal advice upon the emergency orders that you require? Have you made a note? And when I say made a note, preferably not on your phone if there's a risk that your phone could be confiscated. Not on paper, again, if there's a risk that could be found. But a mental note are really important telephone numbers for you, that if it is the case that you need to leave in an emergency, that you have access to those vital telephone numbers. And that could include your GP, your social worker, your solicitor, health visitor, or women's support groups. Also, again, have you recorded any login details, but not on paper because that is a security risk? But do you remember important login details that you might need should you have to leave your family home? Have you placed important documents in this easy accessible place? And this could include your driving license, your passports or your children's passports, recent bank statements, a red book or red books which are applicable for your children, and any other important documents. What's really important for you to think about, are there any items that you would need should you leave home? And this again involves medication for yourself or your children. Do you have access to money? Now, when you put a plan together, you've got to be really careful because you do not want to make someone who's in the household who you do not trust become suspicious, because that could place you or your children in a far greater risk of harm. So be very careful for when you start putting things together, and only take those steps which are absolutely essential, ensuring that your safety is always maintained. You must remember that what you are experiencing will be really important to any family law solicitor. And you must not think that because of the coronavirus and the current lockdown and restrictions that have been imposed upon us, that you must put up with and continue to live the way that you are. Help is out there. There might be a difference in terms of how you access that help, but it is there. And you must remember that if you require this help or assistance, a solution will always be found, as it was even before COVID-19. It's really important that you do not suffer in silence or in isolation. There are a number of people who would want to help you. Thank you.